I will say this, we do have, if you look at the calculation, this year I'm so very proud of my staff because we had a deep discussion last year. Even though we had an A on the state report card, we still had quite a few students who were in the limited or basic category of math or ELA. And the question we posed was, what are we going to do to get as close to no students as possible in limited or basic? And so we came up with quite a few strategies, tested those out semester after semester, and they worked. And so we were able to see a very small number as compared to the year before of students in the basic and limited category, and a much higher percentage of students in the proficient, accelerated, and even advanced. We use what's called a half band strategy. So we take the students and we put them, we look at their scores throughout the year on assessments that either we make or that our district has given us, and we place them in bands to kind of predict where they're going to fall on the OST. And our goal is to take the top half of each band and push them to the next band. And when you keep doing that, ultimately what happens is everybody moves out of the bottom bands. And so that's what the goal was for that. So as you can see, this year, we actually had the highest PI we've had in years since we started OSTs and moved from OGT. This is the highest PI we've had since the OGT left. I'm some may be familiar with the OGT. Just to kind of give a background, OGT was kind of just a math, science, social studies assessment, overall assessment. When we moved to the Ohio State test, it really forced schools to question your practice. Are you really teaching with depth? Instead of teaching a lot of concepts, are you teaching the concepts and you're going very deeply in them? Because now schools are responsible for each content area, not just an overall math, where you would have a few questions from geometry, a few algebra here and there. No, you have to know the content. And I'll be very honest with that change from OGT to OST. We had to have a major mind shift in my staff, because we had been doing so well for all of these years with OGT, and it was okay to teach on the surface. And then when OST comes, it exposed where we had our weaknesses. And the first thing that staff would say would be, well, it's the kids. The kids are not the same as they used to be. The kids are not the same. And that's one of the reasons I started with what I did before, which is about that mindset. And so I had to have some very difficult conversations, because we're here to educate. So we have to find the solution. And we're educating in an urban environment. We know that there are going to be some difficulties, but the question is, what are we going to do to move past that? So with the change from OGT to OST, we did have a lot of conversations. I had to go back, do some things with cultural competency, because we're finding all these weaknesses now, and what we need to do to address the needs of our students. We started studying how to really instruct and teach students in poverty. And we had to do it intentionally. So those are just a few of the changes we had and trends with the achievement piece. Now I think moving on to the next component, see which one is next. Progress, we always get an A in progress, because every year we basically surpass what we did last year. Although our component grade dropped, our achievement went up, so our progress still continued, and students are progressing from year to year in their content areas. So we're seeing some improvement year to year. So progress is usually looks like that with the value added. Students are growing. One of the things we found is that on average, most of our students grow 1 to 2 grade levels once they get in our hands. And so that's a plus from year to year. When we compare our spring to spring, for example, we have an assessment, the NWEA, we're seeing major growth in our students, even though we know over the summer there's usually a slide back because there's not that consistent instruction. Students are not practicing over summers, but we're still able to grow them from spring to spring, even with that minor regression in the summer. The next component is the graduation rate. We've had 100% graduation rate for 14 years. Every single child that comes through our school graduates. And to this day, every single child has graduated with the exception of 1 year using the actual graduation standards and not alternative options. So that means they are passing assessments, the state assessments. So yeah, once again, 100% graduation rate. 100% of our students apply to college, whether that be a 2-year college, some sort of trade school, or a 4-year college, and 100 of them are accepted into a 4-year college, even if they don't attend the 4-year college. The next one is, if we scroll up a little more, a little higher, and then I'll come down to that one. The gap closing. This is what we were talking about before. We've been pretty consistent with gap closing because, as I stated, when students come in, especially for our most vulnerable populations, we're making sure that we are improving their learning and their achievement from year to year. So gaps are closing for our students. We do have special education in our building. We also are closing the gap for our minority subgroups as well. And the last component is the prepared for success component. This component is probably one of the most difficult ones for a high school, and particularly an urban high school, because it's based on test scores on the ACT and the SAT. And there are some assessments that traditionally our students don't always do very well on. And so what we've found is we asked ourselves this question: what is it that is stopping our students from passing SATs and ACTs? I mean, we have kids who are taking AP courses, they're passing with 5s, and they're going to college campuses and they're doing fine, but they're not passing these standardized assessments for colleges. And we really had to ask ourselves that question. And so we were intentional about researching what it is. Why is it that some more affluent districts, students are doing so very well on these assessments, but they're not in urban districts? And one of the things we found was exposure. A lot of our students are not exposed to the assessment until their junior year. And so what we did to combat that is we started an initiative where when students came in their freshman year and their sophomore year, our school used our actual budget to purchase vouchers. Now, of course, students get free vouchers their junior or senior year, but we actually purchased vouchers for them to start taking the ACT and the SAT in the 9th and 10th grade. And we did that for a very specific reason, because if a student doesn't know or has never seen the assessment, then if they're the first time they're seeing it when they get to their junior year, they don't have a lot of time to improve. But if we know where they stand their freshman, sophomore year, and I'm not referring to just the PSAT, I'm saying the real SAT and the actual ACT. If we know where they stand, then we can take the time to create a plan to get them where they need to be. And one of the reasons why this component is so difficult is that it's based off of 2 cohorts. There's really not an easy way to plan for this one. The state counts last year's graduating class and this year's graduating class in this component, and they merge them together to get that. You do get points for students who attend College Credit Plus, but only if they have what's called a remediation free score. So if a student is they have, let's say, 40 College Credit Plus hours, but they have not had a acceptable score on the SAT or ACT, the school does not get credit for a lot of that component. So that's one of the things that's kind of held us back a little bit, but some of the things we're doing to combat that, once again, is the early exposure to the assessment. We've also been very intentional about embedding SAT and ACT practice daily in classrooms so that students are seeing those. And one of the most recent things that I think has been really, really helpful for our students is the partnership between the SAT and College Board and Khan Academy. Students can go on a free website, link a report from a PSAT or an SAT, and the Khan Academy will literally create a practice program based on their needs. So now that it's free, and all of our students can access it, we're starting to see that that's been very beneficial. And data shows that if they do just 6 to 20 hours on that program, they can increase their score sometimes 100 points on an SAT and or more. I've also seen a student go from a 23 on an ACT to a 30 on an ACT from consistent practice and exposure to that assessment. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing for those components. Overall, you can kind of see where we stand. I believe we have the highest score in this area in our district. A C is okay, but of course we want to push for a B or an A. So now what we're doing is strategically planning because we know it's based on past cohorts. So now we're planning for the future. So this year we're planning for the class of 2022. What is that going to look like, and what we need to do to make sure that they all meet that requirement. One of the things I found, and this may sound pretty simple, but one of the things that I found helps my students to understand the importance of that remediation free score is with incentives. So I offer incentives. So we have a senior trip this year. We're going to the Smoky Mountains. I'm paying their bus fare if they have a remediation free score. By going and finding community partners, fundraising, things of that sort, it kind of makes it very real for them. And then also by having some time to talk to parents about the importance of these scores. A GPA is great. A GPA and a high test score is even better when you're going to college. The test score is something that can make or break scholarship money. And I think that when we pose that message to parents, then we start to see a lot more backing at home, because when they know that money can come out of it, a lot of time my parents will really push that practice at night and at home on a daily basis. We recommend 5 to 10 questions a night for our students so that they can be prepared. And over time, as you can see, from a freshman year to a junior year, if you're doing 5 to 10 questions from College Board or ACT, you're probably going to be much better prepared for the assessment in the end. So overall, those are just a few strategies. I think that's basically what I have. Sure.